We're finally good to go. Sorry, had a little bit of a delay, but that's why we record things and put them on Twitch. So today we have another great lecture from Philosophical Research Society. I want to talk a little bit about PRS. Encourage you guys to reach out to them, dig more into them, see what they're all about. They're huge. Well, their founder is a huge inspiration for me. The reason I started keeping my library, which is now the Temple Library, and his work. I want to speak a little bit about that before we dive into today's lecture. Today. Well, I guess it is a lecture. It's a video of a lecture. So today's lecture is appropriate. So Philosophical Research Society was founded by Manly P. Hall. He was a Canadian-born mystic who moved to California kind of at the beginning of the 20th century and was a major influence. His major influence came to bear in a real way in the modern flourishing of the New Age and even occultism in California. He had a lot to do with that. Unfortunately, got really far from where he was. Snow off the bluff. What's up and good morning. Once he started PRS, Philosophical Research Society, he made it his goal to discover the secret teachings of all ages, right, from across the world. And so as a result of that, and going on that adventure, he was funded by some wealthy patrons who funded his journeys and his collection of materials. And with those, he returned back to establish the Philosophical Research Society Library. He established the library, all the things he collected, the rare documents, rare statues, everything from around the world, and continued his search at New York Public Library, at the British Museum Library, for all the occult teachings in the history of the world. And it was not a fame-driven thing. He was very unknown outside of people who were interested in these things, and he worked to get it. Lisa, you may have to resubscribe on Prime. I'm noticing you're not having the star next to your name right now, so you have to Prime sub every month. That's something we found out. Every month you have to go ahead and just subscribe again and do your Prime sub, but it's free still. You just got to do it. So with that said, Manly P. Hall is, again, one of my personal heroes, a phenomenal scholar, a lecturer, just a significant mind to me, and certainly to me personally. His work and his lectures are a huge influence on, and massively formative in my understanding of everything that we discuss. So his book, The Secret Teaching of All Ages, is this book. There is a modern paperback version, but naturally, Moses doesn't have the modern paperback version. It is the book. It is the most beautiful and wonderful book I've ever owned. In terms of just its composition, he designed the whole thing. He did it all. He was a phenomenal human being. And a lot of what you see that we covered in William Cooper, and a lot of what was covered in a lot of what we heard from Theosophy from Blavatsky yesterday, is all included in here, included and sort of linked together. And I've considered kind of going through this book. It's a very long book, obviously, but we could do that over a course of a series of days, if that's something you guys were interested in. Just the table of contents I'll give you now. First, the ancient mysteries and secret societies which have influenced modern Masonic symbolism. The ancient mysteries and secrets, so that includes ancient systems of education, Celsus concerning the Christians, knowledge necessary to right living, the Druidic mysteries of Britain and Gaul, the rites of Mithras, the Mithraic and Christian mysteries contrasted. Then he goes into the ancient mysteries and secret societies, part 2, the Gnostic mysteries, Simon Magus and Basilides, Abraxas, the Gnostic concept of deity, the mysteries of Serapis, labyrinth symbolism, the Odinic or Gothic mysteries. Then he goes into the Ancient Mysteries and Secret Societies, Part 3, the Eleusinian Mysteries, the Lesser Rites, the Greater Rites, the Orphic Mysteries, the Bacchic Mysteries, the Dionysic Mysteries. Atlantis and the Gods of Antiquity includes Plato's Atlantis in the light of modern science, the myth of the dying god, the rite of Tammuz and Ishtar, the mysteries of Attis and Adonis, the rites of Sabazius, the Kabiric mysteries of Samothrace. Then the life and writings of Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, suppositions concerning the identity of Hermes, the mutilated hermetic fragments, the Book of Thoth, Poimandres, the vision of Hermes, the mystery of universal mind, the seven governors of the world. Then he goes into the initiation of the pyramid, the opening of the Great Pyramid by Caliph el-Mamun, the passageways and chambers of the Great Pyramid, the riddle of the Sphinx, the pyramid mysteries, the secret of the pyramid coffer, the dwelling place of the hidden god, Isis, virgin of the world, the birthdays of the gods, the murder of Osiris, the hermetic Isis, the symbols peculiar to Isis, the troubadours, the mummification of the dead. It goes into the sun, a universal deity, the solar trinity, Christianity and the sun, the birthday of the sun, the three suns, the celestial inhabitants of the sun, and the midnight sun. Then the zodiac and its signs, primitive astronomical instruments, the equinoxes and solstices, the astrological ages of the world, the circular zodiac of the Tentira, the interpretation of the zodiacal signs, and the horoscope of the world. The Bembine Table of Isis, Plato's initiation in the Great Pyramid, the history of the Bembine Table, Platonic theory of ideas, the interplay of the three philosophical zodiacs, the Chaldean philosophy of triads, and then the Orphic egg, which brings us to wonders of antiquity, the ever-burning lamps, the Oracle of Delphi, the Dodonian Oracle, the Oracle of Trophonius, the initiated architects, and the seven wonders of the world, the life and philosophy of Pythagoras, which includes Pythagoras and the School of Crotona, Pythagorean fundamentals, the symmetrical solids, the symbolic aphorisms of Pythagoras, Pythagorean astronomy, Kepler's theory of the universe. Then he does Pythagorean mathematics, the theory of numbers, the numerical values of letters, method of securing the numerical power of words, an introduction to the Pythagorean theory of numbers, the sieve of Aristophanes, the meanings of the 10 numbers, the human body and symbolism, the philosophical mannequin, the three universal centers, the temples of initiation, the hand in symbolism, the greater and lesser man, the anthropos or the oversoul, the Hiramic legend. So now it gets into like kind of specifically Masonic stuff. The Hiramic legend is the building of Solomon's temple, the murder of Hiram Abiff, the martyrdom of Jacques de Molay, that's the Templars who we talked about on Friday the 13th, the spirit fire and the pineal gland, the wanderings of the astronomical Hiram, Cleopatra's needle, and Mason's marks. Then he goes to the Pythagorean theory of music and color, Pythagoras and the diatonic scale, therapeutic music, the music of the spheres, the use of color and symbolism, the colors of the spectrum and the musical scale, zodiacal and planetary colors. He goes to fishes, insects, animals, reptiles, and birds, Jonah and the whale, the fish, the symbol of Christ, the Egyptian scarab, Jupiter's fly, the serpent of wisdom, the sacred crocodile. Part 2 is the dove, the yonic emblem, the self-renewing phoenix, the great seal of the United States of America, Bast, the cat goddess of the Ptolemies, Apis, the sacred bull, the monoceros or unicorn. Then he goes flowers, plants, fruits, and trees, the flower, a phallic symbol, the lotus blossom, the Scandinavian world tree Yggdrasil, the sprig of acacia, the fruit of the grape, the magical powers of the mandrake. And then stones, metals, and gems is prehistoric monuments, the tablets of the law, the holy grail, the ages of the world, talismanic jewels, zodiacal and planetary stones and gems. And finally, ceremonial magic and sorcery, the black magic of Egypt, Dr. Johannes Faustus, the Mephistopheles of the grimoires, the invocation of spirits, pact with demons, the symbolism of the pentagram. I think that's the last chapter. Oh, no. No, we're only halfway there. The elements and their inhabitants. I'm just going to give the chapter title so we can get into today's lecture, and this will kind of give you an idea of everything. So it's the elements and their inhabitants, Hermetic pharmacology, chemistry and therapeutics, the Kabbalah, the secret doctrine of Israel, fundamentals of Kabbalistic cosmogony, the tree of the Sefirot, Kabbalistic keys to the creation of man, an analysis of the tarot cards, the tabernacle in the wilderness, the fraternity of the Rose Cross, Rosicrucian doctrines and tenets, 15 Rosicrucian and Kabbalistic diagrams, alchemy and its exponents, the theory and practice of alchemy, the theory and practice of alchemy part 2, the chemical marriage, Bacon, Shakespeare, and the Rosicrucians, the cryptogram as a factor in symbolic philosophy, Freemasonic symbolism, mystic Christianity, the cross and crucifixion, the mystery of the apocalypse, the faith of Islam, American Indian symbolism, and the mysteries and their emissaries. So that's this book, again, published I want to say this is a 1928 edition, making this edition almost 100 years old. This one... Yeah, so this one is the 6th edition, published in 1936. Originally published in 1928. This edition being pretty phenomenal from a book collection perspective because it includes some of the most exciting stuff I've ever seen in the book. Firstly, there's a Mr. Hall's autograph, which this took my breath away when I discovered it. This was given to me as a gift. I came home one day from a trip, and it would happen to be sitting there on my porch. Thank you, Haas is real, for the follow. And secondly, it's got these photos of Manly P. Hall. These are photographs pasted into the book. You can see the book pages are yellow and these are white. Like there's a freestanding photograph, like postcard, like pasted into the book. So this is definitely a very special edition. And it's one of the most thoughtful things I've ever received in my life. All that said, I'd like to share the contents of this book with you guys. I don't think that I can realistically do that in this format. This is something we're going to have to work on. I think we can maybe do a book club about it, kind of get you guys the paperback version or the PDF versions and work from there. But today's lecture is presented to us, is brought to us, was delivered by the Philosophical Research Society, the foundation that Manly P. Hall started. They're based in Los Angeles. We will absolutely happily organize a group trip there. They're based in Los Angeles, and by and large, they do great work preserving his works and bringing speakers on topics that he explored. So, with that said, today's lecturer is Mitch Horowitz, and he's speaking on the secret history of America. This is a topic that Hall obviously covered in here, and maybe we'll go to that chapter and read a bit from Secret Teachings as a lead-in to the lecture. Give me just a moment, and I'll translate the table of contents, which is written in Roman numerals, and distill from it a clear idea of where I'm headed. I can't find the table of contents again. This book truly is a cryptograph. Sorry for the dead air, gang. I'm just finding my bearings here. Did I not just read a chapter title from this that was like about the United States? The occult? That's truly a mysterious book, dude. Truly a mysterious book. I swear I just read you guys this table of contents, and I swear this chapter was here, and yet it is not. That said, I will read you something here. I don't know if you guys are as excited about old books as me, but this is like a deeply magical experience. How about this? From page 200. Episodes from American history. Many times the question has been asked, was Francis Bacon's vision of the New Atlantis a prophetic dream of the great civilization which was so soon to rise upon the soil of the New World? It cannot be doubted that the secret societies of Europe conspired to establish upon the American continent, quote, a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, end quote. Two incidents in the early history of the United States evidence the influence of that silent body which has so long guided the destinies of peoples and religions. By them, nations are created as vehicles for the promulgation of ideals, and while nations are true to these ideals, they survive. When they vary from them, they vanish, like the Atlantis of old, which has ceased to, quote, know the gods, end quote. In his admirable little treatise, Our Flag, Robert Allen Campbell revives the details of an obscure but most important episode of American history, the designing of the colonial flag of 1775. The account involves a mysterious man concerning whom no information is available other than that he was on familiar terms with both General George Washington and Dr. Benjamin Franklin. The following description of him is taken from Campbell's treatise. Little seems to be known concerning this old gentleman, and in the materials from which this account is compiled, his name is not even once mentioned, for he is uniformly spoken of or referred to as the Professor. He was evidently far beyond his 70 years, and he often referred to historical events of more than a century previous, just as if he had been a living witness of their occurrence. Still, he was erect, vigorous, and active, hale, hearty, and clear-minded, as strong and energetic every way as in the prime of his life. He was tall, of fine figure, perfectly easy, and very dignified in his manners, being at once courteous, gracious, and commanding. He was, for those times, and considering the customs of the colonists, very peculiar in his method of living, for he ate no flesh, fowl, or fish. He never used for food any green thing, any roots, or anything unripe. He drank no liquor, wine, or ale, but confined his diet to cereals and their products, fruits that were ripened on the stem in the sun, nuts, mild tea, and the sweets of honey, sugar, or molasses. He was well educated, highly cultivated, of extensive as well as varied information, and very studious. He spent considerable of his time in the patient and persistent conning of a number of very rare old books and ancient manuscripts which he seemed to be deciphering, translating, or rewriting. These books and manuscripts, together with his own writings, he never showed to anyone, and he did not even mention them in his conversations with the family, except in the most casual way. And he always locked them up carefully in a large, old-fashioned, cubically shaped, iron-bound, heavy oaken chest whenever he left his room, even for his meals. He took long and frequent walks alone, sat on the brows of the neighboring hills, or mused in the midst of the green and flower-gemmed meadows. He was fairly liberal, but in no way lavish, in spending his money, with which he was well supplied. He was a quiet, though a very genial and a very interesting member of the family, and he was seemingly at home upon any and every topic coming up in conversation. He was, in short, one whom everyone would notice and respect, whom few would feel well acquainted with, and whom no one would presume to question concerning himself, as to whence he came, why he tarried, or whither he journeyed. By something more than a mere coincidence, the committee appointed by the Colonial Congress to design a flag accepted an invitation to be guests, while in Cambridge, of the same family with which the professor was staying. It was here that General Washington joined them for the purpose of deciding upon a fitting emblem. By the signs which passed between them, it was evident that both General Washington and Dr. Franklin recognized the professor, and by unanimous approval he was invited to become an active member of the committee. During the proceedings which followed, the professor was treated with the most profound respect, and all of his suggestions immediately acted upon. He submitted a pattern which he considered symbolically appropriate for the new flag, and this was unhesitatingly accepted by the other 6 members of the committee, who voted that the arrangement suggested by the professor be forthwith adopted. After the episode of the flag, the professor quietly vanished, and nothing further is known concerning him. Did General George Washington and Dr. Franklin recognize the professor as an emissary of the mystery school which has so long controlled the political destinies of this planet? Benjamin Franklin was a philosopher and a Freemason, possibly a Rosicrucian initiate. He and the Marquis de Lafayette, also a man of mystery, constitute 2 of the most important links in the chain of circumstance that culminated in the establishment of the original 13 American colonies as a free and independent nation. Dr. Franklin's philosophic attainments are well attested to in Poor Richard's Almanac, published by him for many years under the name Richard Saunders. His interest in the cause of Freemasonry is also shown by his republication of Anderson's Constitutions of Freemasonry, a rare and much disputed work on the subject. It was during the evening of July 4th, 1776, that the second of these mysterious episodes occurred. In the old State House in Philadelphia, a group of men were gathered for the momentous task of severing the last tie between the old country and the new. It was a grave moment, and not a few of those present feared that their lives would be forfeit for their audacity. In the midst of the debate, a fierce voice rang out. The debaters stopped and turned to look upon the stranger. Who was this man who had suddenly appeared in their midst and transfixed them with his oratory? They had never seen him before. None knew when he had entered, but his tall form and pale face filled them with awe. His voice, ringing with a holy zeal, the stranger stirred them to their very souls. His closing words rang through the building. God has given America to be free. As the stranger sank into a chair exhausted, a wild enthusiasm burst forth. Name after name was placed upon the parchment. The Declaration of Independence was signed. But where was the man who had precipitated the accomplishment of this immortal task, who had lifted for a moment the veil from the eyes of the assemblage, and revealed to them a part at least of the great purpose for which the new nation was conceived? He had disappeared, nor was he ever seen again or his identity established. This episode parallels others of a similar kind recorded by ancient historians, attendant upon the founding of every new nation. Are they coincidences, or do they demonstrate that the divine wisdom of the ancient mysteries still is present in the world, serving mankind as it did of old? So, we have all these wonderful occult stories in the history of America, and Manly P. Hall, being a Canadian who moved to America, was very convinced of them and very excited about them, and wrote a lot about them. And so Mitch Horowitz, who we're going to be listening to in just a moment here, has done a lot of work recreating a lot of that and reviewing a lot of Hall's writing on it. So that's kind of my lineup for today's talk. I'm going to try to jump in after the intro on the video here, which I did have queued up on my phone, but I maybe... That looks like Mitch... No, wait, that's the introducer. So I did have that queued up on my phone, and I'll just find it right here. No, this is him. Okay. We'll just bring it back to the... There we go. Title. So, all right, I guess we're just going to go into it like this. So, as usual, I will give my commentary throughout, but I think it's a pretty solid talk.
Wallace was regarded as the kind of national...
We'll just jump
to get ready. I was going to wear my Blue Oyster Cult t-shirt, but it was just that kind of day, so Sabbath will have to do. This is a very special night because it represents the launch of the new Manly Hall book, The Secret History of America, and it's an interesting trajectory that's behind Manly's work right now in the 21st century. When he died in 1990, it was a very difficult time for Manly. He feared that his work would be forgotten. He was worried that the books that he had written and the lectures that he had delivered over the course of decades and decades and the hundreds of articles and essays would just be forgotten by time. There was a new digital culture that was just dawning, and he didn't feel like he was any part of it. And to some extent, quite frankly, he was taken advantage of by people at that time in his life. A lot of you are aware there was a great controversy around the circumstances surrounding Manly's death. There were a couple of con artists who kind of got their talons in him, and they...
Wait. Yo, his death was super sketch, and it's interesting he brought that up. I think he was murdered, to be straight up. His death was never officially looked into, like autopsy report I think never released. Super sketch. He had a very strange relationship with his wife. He had all sorts of strange people who were interested in him in a lot of interesting different ways. We will look into Manly P. Hall's death one of these days, on one of these mornings.
They sang him a beautiful song about how they were going to re-release his work over the dawning internet, and they were going to broadcast his lectures through satellite technology and so on. And he was taken in by all this to the point where even just a few days before his death, he had signed over his will under circumstances that were subject to a great deal of questioning to one of these figures who had found their way into his life. And a federal court judge later overturned the will and said that the circumstances didn't pass any reasonable person's sniff test. And actually, for a while, as some of you may be aware, the LAPD even had an open file on Manly's death, investigating the question of whether there was foul play involved. And that file is now closed. And I don't think there was foul play involved, but there were circumstances.
I sure do. It was super duper sketch. And maybe he wasn't poisoned, but if he wasn't poisoned, then he was certainly magically killed, in my opinion.
That surrounded his death that were disturbing. And part of these circumstances grew his sense of personal vulnerability at that time in life grew out of his fear that the work that he had achieved and compiled over the course of an extraordinary lifetime would be forgotten. And I think tonight, in a sense, can almost be a celebration that not only is Manly's work not forgotten, but I feel certain that due to the popularity of the Reader's Edition of The Secret Teachings of All Ages, the new publication of Secret History of America, the events that are going on at PRS ensure that Manly is being more widely read today in the opening decades of the 21st century than he was during his lifetime. And his work is out digitally and in book form, and there are new people coming to it. And this new book is just going to, I think, expose a whole new generation of readers to work by a man who feared.
So here's the thing about Manly P. Hall in this book and what the topic we're going to dive into today. He is a qualified expert on occultism, the mysteries, magic, all this stuff. Like really, truly phenomenally one of the most learned people of all time. And it's from that perspective that he constructs his conspiracy theories, as it were, and his view on the founding of America. And that's why it's very, very, very interesting to me, to us as students of this stuff. And I think even in the bigger political sense, if you miss this stuff, you miss a lot.
That he would die and be forgotten. But he has not been forgotten because the questions that he posed were just indestructible questions. He affirmed an ideal for people that history is not just a linear timeline and a march of events and dates and names, but history is a kind of living thing that, if looked at in the right way, becomes a story of every individual's wish to relate to some sort of higher, unknown, not always visible forces in life. That the history of individuals, of civilizations, of developments in technology, of advances in the capacity of the individual to live out his or her fullest potential goes hand in hand with the spiritual search, with the search for the extra physical, with the search for the existence of primeval principles within the communities and the societies that we live in and within the story of our own lives. The questions that motivated Manly P. Hall are indestructible questions. And the questions that motivate you all here tonight are indestructible questions. And these things can never be forgotten. And Manly has not been forgotten. And it gives me the greatest joy that not only is his work being read by larger and larger numbers of people, but even obscure corners of his work that he thought were going to be forgotten, lectures that he gave that were later transcribed, essays that he wrote, articles that he wrote back in the 1920s, 1930s for esoteric and occult journals that he published, are now reaching a whole new audience, a whole new constituency. And many of these things can be found, as far as they pertain to American history, in The Secret History of America. Manly had a kind of thesis about American history, which is very, very important to understand. I call it the Secret Society thesis, and it runs throughout his work, and it was this. His contention was that primeval wisdom was preserved within small communities of people, small groups, and organizations that are sometimes thought of as being secret, like Freemasonry or Rosicrucianism. And he believed that these groups, these kind of communities of search, were the retention and the repository of wisdom that had been part of the quest to translate unknown principles into symbols, symbols that could be looked upon and could remind individuals of the permanence of life in ways.
There's something about this idea of the symbols being at the root of language, right? When we look at Egyptian language, cuneiform, things like that, and how the symbol, picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So a symbol can include a few different pictures in it, and so it can encode a lot more information than just words spoken or written or whatever.
Ways that go beyond the physical. And the centerpiece of the mission of the secret society was the protection of the individual search for meaning. The protection of the individual search for meaning. That's the most vital principle of life. With it, everything becomes possible. Without it, everything is meaningless. And I think that is embodied in the very beautiful, very mysterious symbol of the Iron Pyramid that exists today on the back of our dollar bill. You see a pyramid, sort of a work of temporal worldliness, capped by the all-seeing eye of providence. And the eye of providence is not part of the pyramid, it hovers just above the pyramid. And the suggestion is that the work of men and women is incomplete without a sense of the higher, without a sense of the ineffable. And it's surrounded by the Latin maxim, annuit septis noos ordo seclorum, which can be roughly translated as God smiles on our new order of the ages. People hear the term new order nowadays, and thanks to late night radio and stuff that goes on the internet, they think it's this fearsome phrase. To me, it's a beautiful phrase. It's a beautiful phrase. The symbol of the Iron Pyramid on the back of our dollar bill.
Oh yeah, so Manly is the source of a lot of this knowledge that later makes its way into conspiracy theory. But I should distinguish, and of course this is not Manly speaking, this is Mitch Horowitz recasting a lot that Manly had written in a very convenient way. The Manly's perspective on all this stuff is that it's great. Right? Like he's very, we'll call him very pro-Illuminati, we'll say.
It's not a leaf directly out of Freemasonry, but I think it was very closely inspired by Freemasonry. It was a symbol, as you can read about in Secret History of America, that was devised very, very early in the nation's history. On July 4th, 1776, appropriately enough, the newly founded Continental Congress formed a subcommittee. And this subcommittee, which was chaired by Benjamin Franklin, himself a Freemason, was charged with designing the seal of the Republic. And it took about 4 years until they settled upon a final design. And that final design was on its obverse side, its front-facing, its public-facing side, the familiar American eagle with arrows clutched in one claw and olive branches of peace clutched in another claw. But the obverse, the reverse symbol, was the more mysterious, more esoteric eye and pyramid surrounded by that beautiful Latin maxim. And for many years, most Americans were unfamiliar with the reverse side. It was used as a seal for government business. It was used as a diplomatic imprimatur, but it wasn't widely known to the public. And it was actually only in the year 1935 that it got placed on the back of our currency.
So that's
that was
interesting.
Thanks to two free.
Didn't realize that it was almost a secret seal, because we've grown up with it on the back of the dollar, right? But it was a secret seal. Wow.
Freemasons who were then in the White House, Franklin Roosevelt and his Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Wallace, who actually later became his second vice president. He was followed by the better known Harry Truman. But Wallace was considered an extraordinary figure during the 1930s, and in many respects, Wallace was regarded as the kind of national philosopher of the New Deal. And Wallace was a man of real occult passions. He was a Freemason, he was a theosophist, he read very deeply into Tibetan Buddhism at a time when most Americans had barely even heard of Buddhism. He was very interested in astrology, and when Wallace sort of came onto Roosevelt's radar, he was very kind of turned on by the idea of having this man in his administration, first as Secretary of Agriculture, because Wallace's father had been the Secretary of Agriculture in the administration of Warren Harding. And Wallace was also a Republican. He came from a long line of Republicans, and Roosevelt felt that it would add some gravitas to his administration to have a Republican voice in it. Even though he had been elected on a very liberal plank, he liked the idea of having a Republican who was a Secretary of Agriculture who was a Republican, who came from a long line of Republicans. At the time, Wallace was the editor of a magazine in Iowa called Wallace's Farmer, which had been founded by his grandfather. And Wallace's Farmer was an agricultural journal, which, among other things, used astrology to advise farmers on planting cycles.
And I mean, that's still extremely, extremely common, right? If you guys have ever picked up the Farmer's Almanac, it's, I think, the most sold book in America or something like that. And if you've ever picked it up, you don't have to go very far in it to realize that it has a lot of astrology in it. It has predictions that are on the next year that are purely based on planetary placements and things like that. Excuse me. And it's often will have like other, not what I'll call occult teachings, but like, you know, the meanings of trees and things like that, symbolic teachings, which, you know, for a farmer's almanac is related to farming, but it's not essential to farming.
And was in its own way, a very wide-ranging magazine. And at that time, Wallace himself was very, very deeply ensconced in different esoteric studies. He was interested in reincarnation. He was interested in Native American mysticism. He wore vestments and was an official within an organization called the Liberal Catholic Church, which was a branch of the Theosophical movement. He was very interested in mind metaphysics, in New Thought. One of the books that he was most turned on by was a book called In Tune with the Infinite by a writer named Ralph Waldo Trine. It's not a widely read book today, but it was a very, very popular book written almost half a century before Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking, which kind of took the whole mind causation philosophy and reprocessed it through scriptural language so that the church-going public could be comfortable with it. But Ralph Waldo Trine's book, In Tune with the Infinite, which in its day was a big bestseller, it came out in 1899, was a very, very mystical book, a very radically ecumenical book. And this was a book toward which Wallace had gravitated when he was a kid. And there were people who lined up to tell Roosevelt, you can't name this guy as your Secretary of Agriculture. He's just too weird. He's a mystic. He's an occultist. He's going to be a really strange presence in the White House. And Roosevelt snapped back at one detractor, Jim Farley, who was the Postmaster General, and said, he's not a mystic. He's a digger. He's a thinker. He'll help the people think. Now, can you imagine today a U.S. president saying, I want this guy for my Secretary of Agriculture because he'll help the people think? That's not something that you could imagine, erupting from the mouth of a president today, is it?
So I think that speaks deeply on things. Maybe I do have a chance in the White House, though.
No, but Roosevelt stood by him, and he brought Wallace into the White House. And Wallace, almost overnight, became a very popular figure. He had the ability to speak to and to inspire very diffuse constituencies. He was a great Secretary of Agriculture. He probably saved thousands upon thousands of family farms during the Great Depression because he was a scientific agriculturalist, and he was one of the first people in the Western world to introduce certain ideas into American agriculture, like crop rotation, turning soil, reducing surplus, doing all kinds of things that helped prop up not only the prices of agriculture during the Depression, but made farms more fertile, increased their output. And in fact, his reforms were later incorporated into Latin America. And for a period of time, there had been periodic famines in Latin America. And with Wallace's reforms, probably hundreds of thousands of people were saved from malnutrition or death by famine in Latin America. He was an extraordinary figure in our public life. But he was always a controversial figure because, and this was something I tremendously admired about this figure, he never hid or concealed his occult beliefs. He didn't keep them on the down low. He was fairly public about his interests. And he used to go to Washington dinner parties, and he would talk about Buddhism and astrology.
Yes.
And he would take out
my
this
man.
Tibetan Buddhist amulet that he carried with him and explain to people that he had relieved himself of chronic migraines by rubbing this amulet on his forehead.
Yes.
And sometimes he would make people very uncomfortable, including Roosevelt himself. There was one time Roosevelt wrote a memo saying, by God, what's the matter with Wallace? Because sometimes he would talk about mystical theories during cabinet meetings and things like that. And Wallace also got involved with a figure whose statue was sculpted by Manly Hall himself, and you can see it in the library, and that was Nicholas Rorick. And Nicholas Rorick was a great Russian artist. There's a small museum in New York City dedicated to Rorick's work today. And Rorick was a visual artist, a set designer, a mystical traveler, and he attracted the attention of a lot of powerful people for a time in the 1930s, and Wallace became one of his students. And for a period of a few years, he was very dedicated to Nicholas Rorick. And in fact, one of Rorick's great works, which still stands in New York City today, and I think it's at the corner of Riverside Drive and West 104th Street, is the Master Building. The Master Building. Today it's called the Master Apartments. It's a magnificent Art Deco residential skyscraper. And Rorick believed that a great teacher from the East, a great adept, was going to emerge on the Western scene and become kind of a world teacher who would usher in a new age of education and spiritual awareness.
And that's where we get the idea of New Ageism.
The conception was that when this master arrived, he would live on the top floor of the Master Apartments. And today, this magnificent skyscraper still stands in New York City. And if you put the master apartments into Google, don't do it right now, but do it later when you're home, you can see that today it's a very expensive piece of real estate. It's beautifully decorated. And most of the people who live there and most of the realtors who trapeze through its lobby have no idea what the original purpose of the building was. So in 1934, Wallace made the decision that this symbol, this mysterious symbol of the eye and pyramid, should be brought more to people's attention, should become part of our public life, because he believed that the idea of this country ushering in kind of a new order of the ages was something that could help lift people's spirits during the Great Depression. Wallace himself used the term New Deal of the ages. He thought that's what the Roosevelt administration was trying to accomplish. Invest people with a sense of dignity and purpose and possibility. Invest in the arts, industry, and agriculture. Give people a chance to feel that they can live out their potentials, that they can create that which they wish to create. And Wallace had this idea that some sort of a commemorative coin or piece of currency should be pressed with this beautiful iron pyramid symbol on it. So he brought this to the attention of Roosevelt, who just loved the idea, because as a fellow Freemason, Roosevelt too had a real taste for portentous imagery and symbol. And he felt that symbol could kind of speak to something in the individual, could arouse energies in the individual. And I think this is very true. I'm always reminding people that, and I know most of you in this room feel this as well, symbols really are mysterious. They really have the capacity to summon something within us, even when we don't necessarily know the specific language or etymology behind them. But when you see the pentagram, you pay attention to that.
So we'll pause it here for today. We'll pick up on this, I think, tomorrow, because it's a good topic, a good talk. It's in keeping with a lot of stuff we do. We started a little late and we got stuff to do, but I want to jump on this, and I have many anecdotes, having young kids, and them encountering symbols for the first time and instantly recognizing them as powerful images. They don't know what it means. They don't know that it has a meaning necessarily. They're young kids. But instantaneous, there's a recognition that that's not just a picture. That has something more to it that's conveying in a deeper, more complete way. And that's that's, I think, so interesting. Because, once you start studying things, you become a student of symbols. And once you're a student of symbols, it's wonderful because there's symbols everywhere. And the world itself becomes a symbol. But you're working within a system, within a framework. But to see that natural curiosity, that natural inclination of children, I always find completely fascinating. So with that said, we will move into today's meditation. Again, we're going through 2 weeks of heart meditation. So I had a great acupuncture session yesterday. For those in the Boulder area, I have a great acupuncturist to recommend. But Dr. Lam, so I've had for ages this weird thing going on with my fingernail. I don't know if the camera's going to get it. And I've shown it to all sorts of healers and people of all sorts of traditions, and no one has really given me any information going on. It's been going for at least 8 years, but I showed it to the doctor yesterday, and he goes, "Oh, that's your pericardium. That's where your pericardium exits. Exit must be blocked, so let's open that up." So he went, and the pericardium, is the area around the heart. And so in Chinese medicine, the pericardium is like the bodyguard of the heart, the guardian of the heart, the keeper of the heart in all these different ways, and a variety of everything we associate with the heart's wisdom and things like that. So I thought it was interesting that while we're doing so much heart-centered stuff, we should have that. In any case, he opened that channel, and I'm feeling all sorts of things in my heart region that I don't, we'll say, traditionally feel. So I'm very interested to do our heart meditation today. Let me get my timer set for 10 minutes here. And let's see who's with us today. Hop over to the Streamlabs. Looks like we got a pretty tight crew. Amiga, another TV viewer. Cat Cold, welcome. That's tight. Never seen you here before. Welcome to the crowd. Diviana, welcome back. Freaky YOLO NR, welcome. Lisa, welcome back. Misery Pimp, as always, welcome. NyQuil, as always, awesome. Welcome. awesome, I guess. Snow off the bluff, as always, welcome. What do mushrooms look like? Good to see you today, bro. Well, we got a nice crowd for this. Cat Cold, Freaky YOLO, if you guys want to smash that follow button or maybe even drop a sub, I love that. Always a good way to show me that you're not a bot and that you appreciate the content. So what we're going to do today, much love. I see what you did there. So what we're going to do for meditation today is a very simple basic meditation. It's a 10-minute round. Just sit comfortably, whether it's floor. Let me give a shout out to David Chen too, who threw a like on Facebook. Greatly appreciated, sir. And to our other Facebook viewer right now, whose name I can't see, but much love. Much love, as Chris says. So we're going to just sit comfortably, sit with the body comfortable in a comfortable posture. If you're sitting in a chair, you might want to have your feet flat on the ground and your hands in your lap. If you're sitting, Esmeralda, thank you for that like. And it's good to see you this morning, as always. You might want to sit there and put your hands in the lap or the arms of the chair. If you're on the floor, you can go ahead and cross your legs, however you feel comfortable. And the goal of this exercise is going to be to focus all of your attention on your heart. Right on your heart. You're going to just focus on the beating of your heart, the feeling of the heart beating, the sound of the heart beating, all of that. You can always feel it, but normally we tune that out. But we're going to tune into it consciously. If you find your mind going to your breath, just focus on breathing through your heart. Right? If you just bring all your attention into your heart. I'm going to go ahead and shut the mic off so you don't have to hear homeschool in the background here. But we're going to go 10 minutes. And the idea is just reside with your entire consciousness, with your entire presence, with your entire mind in your heart. Pay attention to the beating of your heart. Lisa, if your feet don't fit on the ground, either lower your chair or you can sit on the ground. But dangly is going to distract you, right? It's going to distract your mind if you feel your feet dangling. So you can even cross your legs if you can fit them on the seat with you. But the whole thing we're going to do here now is feel the heart. Pay very close attention to the feeling of the heart beating, and you want to just count the beats of the heart. That's a way to keep the mind there, because otherwise we have a tendency to drift. But just count the beats of the heart, and you can just keep counting. Or you can do it like the breath counting work we do, where we start over again, and when we get to 9, start back at 1. Or you can just keep counting. Either way. But count the beating of the heart, focus on the heart, bring yourself into your heart. Hey, we'll take it from there. Boom. There we go, lower chair. All right, I'm going to hit this timer. 10 minutes, everyone. Get in touch with your heart, and I'll see you in 10. Okay. Go ahead and gently bring your awareness back to here and now. Open your eyes. And welcome back to here and now. Hope that was a good one for everybody. That was a really good one for me. I really felt that now that I got my pericardium opened up. So if you don't feel your heart chakra, go see an acupuncturist who can open up your pericardium, because it makes a big difference. I'm here to tell you, it makes a very, very, very big difference. Oof. Well, we're coming into the hey, community showcase. Thanks for tuning in. Coming into the home stretch here on today's episode. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. We'll be bringing it back, of course, tomorrow, as we do every weekday. Same basic time, around 10 a.m. Mountain Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Yeah, NyQuil, I felt like I was taken off, bro. Like I was hit a couple points where it went like, whoa, and then the right side kind of just kicked in, and I went, well, Lisa, so as I was saying before, that area outside the heart is called the pericardium, and it's literally the bag that fits around your heart, you know? And for those of us who have to close off our hearts to people, either because we've had heartbreak or because we need to protect our heart from being hurt or whatever, in any way we think of the heart, rather, right, in terms of love, in terms of health, in terms of anything, knowledge, thinking, all that stuff, then the pericardium gets kind of kicked up, and he's like the bodyguard of the heart. He gets very strong, and he doesn't let anyone, including us, connect to it. And so if you have the opportunity to visit someone who does acupuncture, there are points, kind of beginning here, or ending here, sorry, and they go up, underside of the arm to the heart, or kind of around here-ish, and it also goes inside to, on the other end, down, through the heart and down. But yeah, that is something that can be opened with acupuncture. I'm here to tell you, as a living person who feels the difference in my body in one day, that is something that can be opened through acupuncture. Visit a skilled, traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, acupuncturist, who can open what's called the pericardium channel, and it's pretty intense. Also, doing this meditation certainly is what led me to that, right? Like, that's a big deal. Practicing this heart-centered meditation as we've been practicing. I know you haven't been tuned in with us, but give it a shot for 2 weeks. It's going to make a difference. So with that said, everyone, let's come to the grand finale today, because I got to go do a little math work with my kiddo. Then I got, as I think a lot of you guys saw, I got that fantastic new piece of furniture for the temple from a church. And I therefore was able to rearrange the old piece of furniture in there to become one of the altars. So we're doing a lot of rearrangement in there, etc. Lisa, I don't know about Reiki. It's not the same thing. Reiki's done often even at a distance, but acupuncture specifically is opening physical channels in your body. I'm sure Reiki could help, but I can only speak to if you have a TCM practitioner, acupuncturist who can open that pericardium channel. I think that'll be very helpful. And you can even look it up yourself. You can find YouTube videos how to open your pericardium channel. It's not going to be as good as having someone doing it for you, but it's going to be better than nothing. Right on, gang. Let's take a deep breath. Let's feel that heart beating inside us, pulsing. And let's realize that every living thing has a pulsing inside it, even down to the single-celled organisms, everything pulsing. And let's realize that actually all of reality, the earth itself, even the atoms of which theoretically inanimate objects are made up of, are always pulsing, and we're all pulsing. And let's realize that buzzing, that humming, that pulsing that goes through each of us, through all of creation, is in a coordinized synchronization, is in the process of synchronizing. That everything is in relation to each other, and that it all is connected and has an effect to one another, if nothing else than through the mechanical, energetic interaction of the pulsing. But in a deeper way, every pulsing was begun with an original instance. And that first instance, that first change from stillness, that original source, has reverberated and replicated and pulsed and echoed and come back on itself to make polyrhythms, to create all the pulsing of all the universe. And in that unified oneness, in that communion with the Creator, with the original source, with the Almighty First, let us be humbled and let us be receptive, let us be opened let us open ourselves. Let us let out what we keep in, because that keeps us from pulsing in tune with the higher pulses. Let us take into ourselves what is coming from those higher pulses. Let us not resist it. Let us not close it off, for it will bring us into attunement more quickly and more easily and more readily with our proper tuning. And we will be harmonious, and we will move forward without resistance in life. We will experience joy and abundance that is meant for us when we submit ourselves to what is being given to us in order to attune ourselves. Let us receive that into ourselves. Let us come into tune enthusiastically. Let us not resist in our pride by holding on to the things that keep us out of tune. Let us open up and release them, because we hang on to them in a pride based in fear. Let us know that that fear is a mistake. Let us open up and trust. Trust our place and our presence. And know that suffering is a path to something, is a path to kindness. Let us know that hardship is a path to character and fortitude. Let us know that every obstacle put in our way is a gentle reminder of our strengths, our aptitudes, and our weaknesses, where we can connect with others and be supplemented. Let us make not ourselves whole, but let us make the whole, composed of whole parts. So in that regard, let us bring ourselves into completion, that we can be part of a larger completion. Let us realize that this is a blessed task, a monumental challenge, and an inspiring goal. Let us approach with awe and confidence. Let us realize that at once we are challenged and empowered, because when we are challenged and empowered, we are tested. Let us prove ourselves in this test, and let us see and be inspired by others proving themselves. And if we are not yet at a level to prove ourselves, then let us improve ourselves until we are. And let us see those who are not proving or improving, and let them not be hindrances to us. Let us be an inspiration to them, not out of pride nor out of ego, simply by demonstrating, by being human, by being accessible, by showing each and every one that we are like them, they are like us, and if they can do it, we can do it, and if we can do it, they can do it. Let us take peace and comfort in that knowledge. Let it penetrate our entire beings. Let us cultivate a constant awareness of our interconnectedness. And let us give thanks and praise to that original source that has imbued all this, and who we constitute and carry forward in ourselves. And let us, in receiving that, be blessed and be blessings and grant blessings. And let us all say, Amen. As always, I thank you all for tuning in. I bless you all. I love you all for tuning in and for being yourself, for continuing in your journey. And I will see you right here tomorrow